Kristen asked me to moderate today because she's on the road and popping in and out of different appointments. And what we're talking about today is impactful, effective communication and setting clear expectations with your clients. So communication is one of those things that we can never be good enough at, right? We can always fine tune the way that we talk to our clients, the way that we communicate with our clients, and talking to and communicating with are two different things, right? So just as we do with every, Masterminds call, we don't have a set agenda. Communication and setting expectations with your clients. What did that mean to you guys? And why are we here today? So I'll open up the floor to everybody.
Well, I'll start off. I think that's probably one of my biggest selling points when I first sit down with a new client. I talk about the importance of communication because it kind of holds true with any type of relationship, whether you're dealing with somebody selling a home or a wife or a kid or a friend. And it's important where we have all these different mediums to identify with clients what is the preferred method of communication. And I know that I've learned that varies quite a bit as well from one person to the next. And one last thing is if I prefer the phone call, the traditional phone call, but not everybody does. But if you're communicating with clients either through text or email, I've also learned don't be too eager to send that piece of communication. Read it through before you hit send to make sure that there's not going to be any misunderstanding in terms of the delivery of the message.
Right. And following up with something in writing is probably a really good idea too, because perception's reality, and what somebody might have heard from you over the phone might be different than what you were trying to relay to them, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't want it to be misinterpreted.
Right. I have to think that.
Yeah,
oh yeah, go ahead.
No, like when I do, I guess it depends on who your client is. Like if they start sending you emojis and you send emojis back, mirror and match. And sometimes when you're saying stuff, it can come across, like if you read it two different ways, obviously you may just mean it in a, like this is just a typical, like straightforward sentence, but they may take it a different way. So, it's important if you do those like little emojis to like, do the smile or the thumbs up or something, because, you can read text and emails completely opposite. It's just a matter of like what your mindset is at the time when you're reading it and what the situation was prior to the text. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you just don't know how they're going to take it on the other end sometimes. That's why I like the phone too. I prefer to talk to them over the phone because then you can, really talk to them and they can understand what you mean and they can hear the inflections in your voice opposed to just like text letters.
Do you think it's any different, Kristen? I think that's really great when, you're trying to get, trying to land that client, right? But is it the same thing while the client's under agreement or it's in process?
I think so because, again, I think it comes down to like what the conversation is. You could be negotiating something. Maybe your client's a little upset about something, and you don't want to just send that text because you're like, oh, I don't know how they're going to take it. And they're going to take it wrong. They're going to think that I'm, lazy by not calling them or I'm afraid to call them. It's a really delicate dance, to be honest, I think, to make sure that you're coming across the way that you want to come across. And then they don't have any, bad feelings about you in their head that you don't realize.
Right.
Because that can happen, and then you don't even know. You think you're doing a great job and they took something, whatever you said, they took it the wrong way.
Right. And I was just thinking, while somebody's under agreement, that's when this is what you told me versus no, I didn't say that. That's when that could become a little more, they have more balls in the air. They have more things going on in their life. Right. And maybe they're passively listening to you. Maybe you did tell them what you meant to communicate with them, but I feel like when you're under agreement in business with somebody, I think that you can talk to them on the phone, but it's really important, I think, to send emails too, so you have that record in writing. Not you know, obviously redundancies for me in business is like a cardinal sin. I mean, that's really where, when I have a conversation with somebody and they say, all right, that was great, thanks for giving me all that information, now can you just send it to me in an email? And I'm like, no, because we just had a half-hour conversation. Okay. We should, you know, just whatever, but hitting at least the high points, I think, is important, so that down the 2 weeks down the road, when that situation comes up, you know that there's not going to be a misunderstanding. And if there is, at least the person can revert back to that email and say, oh yeah, you know.
Well, isn't that when, you know, your systems come into place in your timeline? Hey, this is the next step. This is the next step. You know, when you're on the phone with your client, hey, the next step is this. Like this morning when when she signed the offer, I was like, great, congratulations. I will email you later today with the next steps. And then I'll talk to you tonight or tomorrow morning when you get home, you know, that kind of thing, so that they know, like, this is what's going to happen next. Now you have to hire an attorney. Now we have to do this. We have the home inspection, blah, 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 blah. So if you're sending to them a timeline all the time with the dates of when it needs to be completed by, on or before, then at least they have it in front of them and they know what the next steps are.
Right. Yep, right on.
So I just wanted to share something. A really good advice was someone gave me was no bad news via text or email.
Yep.
Say, give me a call back when you get a chance. So text them something like that. You don't want it written. And I was like, wow, that has helped me so much.
Right.
It's like breaking up on a sticky note.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really true. You know, I think, you know, I feel like, you know, we are highly paid professionals. And I really do think, I mean, imagine if you just got like a letter from your doctor or a text message saying, yeah, you have cancer. You know, it's like, no, you need that phone call or that consult. There's a reason that they don't do it that way. Right. And I think that, you know, big business, big money, big calls, right? You have to make those big calls and it hurts. But we owe it to our clients to relay that bad news directly to them, you know, to answer any, because that's the way that we would want to be treated too, you know?
And that's where the expectation part comes in.
Yep.
Communication expectation, right, Melissa? I hear her say, yeah. I mean, have that buyer consultation, right, Melissa? Have that listing consultation and explain, hey, these are the things that could happen. These are the options. This could happen. Hey, if the appraisal comes in low, these are the 3 options. This is what could happen. You know, tell them all of that up front so that it's not shocking to them later, especially now with appraisals. I don't know if you've seen it, but I talked to Carla Heine yesterday, and she's actually going to be on our team meeting tomorrow and talk about appraisals. She's seeing appraisals come in between $3,500 and $80,000 under the agreed upon price. So having those conversations with your sellers right now about appraisals coming in is huge. And if you don't have that conversation, they think they're still in a market where they can get $200,000 over, everything's going to be fine.
I think along those same lines too, and I think we are seeing that, but having the communication with your buyer about that too. You know, it's, hey, congratulations, you just got your 1,200 square foot, you know, Cape and Abington offers accepted for $750,000, and aren't you excited? And the appraisal comes in at 450, right? So we have to, you know, set those expectations up front too. And I think a lot of people are. I mean, I've never been in this. I haven't been in this business at a time ever when an appraisal comes in low and people aren't shocked by it. But now they're like, oh yeah, I kind of figured that was going to happen. You know, I'm buying the most expensive house ever sold in Randolph. So chances are pretty good that the appraisal is going to come in low, you know?
And communication, I mean, I don't want to be doing all the talking here, guys, but, you know, let's talk about communication with your buyers if, you know, if they're waiving their appraisal contingency, you know, and they say, okay, I'll fill the gap. Do they really understand what that means?
They better.
Yeah, they
And
do.
what that really
Yeah, but
could mean.
we
I
have
mean,
to tell, yeah.
even if, I mean, really what you're doing is, you know, when that happens, you're really putting your hands in the, I'm sorry, your financial well-being in the hands of an appraiser that may or may not be good, may or may not be busy, may or may not be in a fight with their spouse, right? Like, just, you know, may or may not be getting ready to go on vacation. So they're trying to punt out as many appraisals as they can. And even, you know, an appraisal is an opinion of value. And it's understood in the industry that different appraisers can have different opinions. So it's not uncommon, especially, you know, in our area, if two appraisals are off by 3 to 5%, and it's a $6,000 or $600,000 home, which is very common in our area, you know, that could be a $30,000 difference between appraisals. So if the appraisal is going to come in low anyway, and one appraiser was to bring it in at 50 grand light, and the next one brings it in 80 grand light, which is very possible, that's a big swing for a lot of people, you know, and it may or may not impact their, you know, their bottom line very much, but it could. And you're just kind of submitting that offer, fingers crossed. I'm hoping the appraisal comes in at least reasonably close to what we're looking at. You guys have all, I'm sure, been on the receiving end of just even outside of this market, a lender calling you saying, hey, the appraisal came in low and way low, and you were caught way off guard by it. You know, that could happen to one of our buyers who waives an appraisal contingency.
I think any
So, Bob,
communication.
can you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe for somebody newer, what that would mean then? That, so it comes in lower and they waive the appraisal contingency. Now what?
Well, that's right. So I think that that's the really important piece here, where number one, I think it's really important. I know that it's really important to know what the numbers are going to be prior to that appraisal coming in low, right? So if Melissa Garlisi is working with a buyer and we know that the list price is on our tiptoes anyway, and this buyer has to go over asking, I think it's really, you know, a realtor like Melissa and a lot of the realtors in the call will let me know. And it's then at that point up to me to show the client that, you know, the house is on for 500 right now. If you do offer 525 and the house appraises for 475, here's what your numbers would look like. Are you okay with that? And if they're okay with that, then wonderful. Then fast forward, you know, full speed ahead. But what I think is really doing the buyer a disservice is not giving them the heads up on something like that. They don't have any idea how appraisals work. All they know is this house is definitely worth it because I have 10 other people behind me making offers too. But that really doesn't have anything to do with the appraised value of the home. So I think it's really important to just be proactive with those numbers as opposed to being reactive once that appraisal comes in low. And then hopefully we're trying to keep everything together without breaking the bank for our buyers, you know, and screwing the sellers along the way too.
So true. I think, you know, Bob, to your point about that, it's never been more important than it is now for us to understand as both listing agents and as buyer agents, the impact that the appraisal is going to have on the deal. And one of the things that we often talk about on this mastermind session campaign that we've been on is, you know, agents out there and realtors out there don't know what they don't know. So when we're writing offers and thinking that this is, you know, the best offer we could have possibly come up with for this particular property, it takes into account the potential for a low appraisal and, you know, what's comfortable for the buyer and what's the competition doing? Do they want to waive their home inspection? All that is so important, but we need listing agents as well as buyer agents. No matter how strong the hit you make as a buyer agent with a great offer, if the seller agent on the other end doesn't recognize the quality of your offer with it, it's still going to just be a numbers game. They're going to go after that highest bid that has a less likelihood to close. You know, I think too, we can use that, we can use this as an opportunity to sell ourselves as seller agents. I've started to include, a long time ago, actually, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a page in my seller pre-listing packet, how Melissa pre-qualifies their offers. So that when I come to the seller with a summary of what the offer looks like, I've already talked to the lender and I've talked to the buyer agent, so that is really as well vetted as I possibly can vet it. It's not a guarantee of an outcome, but certainly it helps the seller to make a more educated decision. So, you know, it's never been more important than, you know, now to have those great communication skills, and you need to practice them. You need to develop them over time. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from my coach, Tasia, you brought up another one too, you know, never deliver bad news by text or email. The other one was, from the time your seller accepts the offer, you know, from the time the seller accepts the offer until the time that we close, that is really your time to shine. So you've already sold yourself on the front end. They've hired you as the listing agent. You've put on all the tinsel and all the lights on the tree to make this market plan look as great as possible. You get the offer, it's under agreement. Now what happens? So having a timeline communication method is really important. Bob, I love what you said. I just had a conversation with this person. I don't want to put it in an email. I don't want to have to spend another half hour putting my email together to reiterate what we just said. So if you put together maybe like your whole communication campaign, you can do it just once, so that when you have that conversation, then you just copy and paste the letter and maybe tweak it slightly and send it out by email. Paper trail in this business is super important. So try to have that rapport from the very beginning and develop those communication skills. It's never been more important. And really the greatest time for you to shine, whether it's for your buyer client or your seller client, is after the P&S is signed. What happens in like those 4 weeks of silence between the P&S and the commitment? That's where you can really rock it and show your value, keep them comfortable, answer their questions, let them know what's coming next, let them know exactly where we are in the process, what's happened with the appraisal, what's happening with the qualification. Well, that's really, really important.
Yeah, no, it really is. And that's he or she who calls first wins, right? And that's part of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, getting to what, you know, the story you were just talking about too, Miss, between the P&S and the commitment, you know, that oftentimes is dead air time, you know,
Right.
And just reaching out and checking in on your clients, I think is really important. Even if you have no news, right? Communication with no news is very valuable. As you and I, as we all know, when people are buying a place, it's the only thing that they're thinking about. It's the only thing on their minds, you know? And when we call just to say, hey, just want to let you know that the appraisal's still not in. It's been 2 weeks, but I do expect it in over the next few days, and I'll call you as soon as it comes in. Those sorts of things, you know, those sorts of calls go a long way. Yeah, for sure. You know, talking about, you know, as far as communication goes, something, and somebody on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, but something that Mike Baird said a few masterminds ago when he moderated our masterminds. Mike Baird's, for those of you guys that might not know, is an attorney with Kellum & Kellum here locally. And he talked about, when he's writing contracts, one of the best pieces of advice he ever got, I think from law school, was they were talking about written communication. And this stuck with me. Don't write it so that it can be understood. Write it so that it cannot be misunderstood. And I think that's so important, right? If we tell somebody, yeah, it's all set, or it looks good, right? That can, you know, you can understand that in a lot of different ways, right? Or it should be okay. You know, you can write that, or you can understand, or it should be okay, it'll likely be okay, but what if it isn't? And what does okay even mean, right? I thought that was so, so important. You know, don't write it so that it can be understood. Write it so that it cannot be misunderstood. Huge difference.
Yeah, that makes sense, Bob. Again, it goes down to, you know, things can sometimes be interpreted a couple of different ways. And so you want to make sure that it's interpreted or understood,
right.
So that there's no hard feelings or creates any unnecessary agita.
Yeah. Like just about every single one of the big problems that we have, just about every single, you know, every big problem that we have with a client in business really always comes down to less than efficient communication, right? If we think back about the last big problem we had with a client or in a transaction, most likely it was because of a misunderstanding along the way, right? Whether that was a voluntary misunderstanding or involuntary, whatever, but there was a misunderstanding in communication somewhere, you know, and And that's the way that it is with, actually Sam just had a client close yesterday. We kind of inherited that client from Radius's direct lending channel. But long story short, as a client inherited a property from their deceased mother, and it was a single family home, and we set it up as a single family home and as a rate and term refinance. After basically we got the appraisal back, we saw that not only is it a 2-family home because there's a detached guest house on the property. It's up in Gloucester. It was legal. It was fine. But now it's not a single anymore. Now it's a 2. And when the title work came back, there was a second mortgage on the property that the daughter and we didn't know about, which is no big deal. But now we're paying that off too, because that was in deceased mom's name. So now it's not a single family rate and term refi. Now it's a cash out refinance on a 2-family. Huge difference. And of course, the client was completely upset and said, you quoted me this at the beginning. Now you're quoting us a point higher, whatever. And that was really because, the game hadn't changed, but the rules of the game had changed, So we asked you what kind of property this was, and you told us it was a single family, but it's not, it's a 2-family. We were paying off the 1 mortgage. And now we're paying off the 2.
She knew.
Right. So, it is what it is, but at least we could go back to some of the emails that we set up with that client at the beginning and let her know, how the terms had changed. And, I think that the communication was there along the way. And like Sam said, she may have known and was just shooting for, to get whatever she could get here, but grasping at straws. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And if we had known from the beginning that it was a 2-family and we're paying off 2 mortgages, not 1, then, our quote would have been the same as it was at the beginning, but I just think that communication is so important, and that thing really could have blown up. It didn't, because I think she knew that the communication was there. She just was, shoot or shoot. I can respect that,
Hey, Bob, this is Dennis. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, so I want to go back to a couple of things like Christian said about the timeline and what Melissa said. So my mindset is this: whenever I'm dealing, by the way, this is Dennis McConnell, for those that don't know, my mindset is that whether it be a buyer or a seller, is I consider this that they're totally ignorant. This is what I do for a full-time job. I do this every day. So I can take certain things for granted, but I can't. So I have to explain to everybody all the steps along the way as if they've never sold or never bought a house before in their entire life. Even if they did, it's better to assume that they haven't, and for them to hear it from you again and again and again, or from somebody else. Oh yeah, I know all that. Okay, let me just explain exactly how my process works, how this works. Because if you go in there with the mindset that these people are totally ignorant, they know nothing about the process because we do it every day, it goes a long way. And it's very, very helpful to them to hear it from you. And again, as Melissa said, those from the time of the P&S being signed to the time that you go to the closing, there is that lull time. That is really the most important time to shine, because that's when people are really they're packing, they're doing whatever they need to do, and they need to hear from you. So it's really, really important. Over communicate.
That's true, Dennis. That's where the rubber really hits the road. That's where you're going to shine. One thing I've found to be super helpful too, in that regard, to clear and open communication with expectations being met. It's a really good idea to identify with your client, whether it's the buyer or the seller, ahead of time, who the attorney will be to represent them. I find having a discussion with an attorney prior to making an offer or prior to even going on market with your seller listing, it gives you the heads up on whether or not you're going to have to work really hard to be on the same page with the seller's attorney. What's their personality like? Do they have any requests of you? Are they easy to talk to? Are they approachable? Are they going to blow up a deal for you? Because maybe they don't work in conveyance very often, and they put in all these things that we generally don't see, customarily in P&S. All those things are really important. I had a conversation with an attorney yesterday for one of my seller clients. I have a basic colonial coming on the market in Sharon at the end of the week, and it has all these really unusual challenges, which kind of means It needs some work, guys. And the kind of work that it needs is a little bit unusual. Like things I've really never seen before. So I just ran it all by the attorney in terms of upfront disclosure to make sure that I wasn't planting any landmines for her when she then goes to write the purchase and sale agreement with the buyer's attorney. One of the issues is that there's a question as to whether or not the finished basement was ever permitted, if the work was actually signed off or not. The town knows about it. The owners are being assessed for it. It's reflected in the square footage, but we can't find the permits that were signed off. So we want to know how to deal with that up front and how to disclose it so that it doesn't all of a sudden blow up the accepted offer when we get to purchase and sale. So that's a great way to avoid miscommunication. Have the conversations up front. Clients, lenders, attorneys.
That's just,
I think it's really hard to do that right now too. I mean, think about how crazy your weekends look, right? Most listing agents in this area have fallen into this pattern of, showings begin at the open house on Saturday from 12 to 2, and then we'll repeat that on Sunday, 1 to 3 or whatever it is. All offers due by Monday morning and, all that craziness. So not only do you not have a lot of time to tour the property with your client, you don't have a lot of time to be, you don't have a lot of time, the luxury of a lot of time to think about how you're going to structure the offer. And if you're working with someone on the loan, other than Bob and Samantha, is your buyer's lender going to get back to you? Or, as the listing agent, have you pigeonholed yourself into this spot where you haven't left enough time to review and vet all the offers that have come in? You have to be thinking about all that too, because that will help you to help your clients make a good decision. You need time to think things over.
and even, letting your sellers know what to expect too. I think letting your buyers know, really letting your sellers know what to expect. So you're getting ready to put the house in the market. Here's what I'm expecting, so that they're not overwhelmed by the process. And, your buyers too, at the initial buyer consult, we don't, the friend close, right? The buddy close is one where, I think most realtor, especially buyer's agents, use when they're initially talking with a client. And that is really, I'm just going to get them to like me so much that they'll use me, right? But oftentimes that buddy close means that we're not giving them some, not setting their expectations properly. So I do think that letting people know that, hey, we're, right now it's the wild, wild west out there, Mr. and Mrs. first time home buyer, second time home buyer. It's the wild, wild west out there. And, we will get through this, but there's going to be some turbulence. It's going to be tough. Hopefully the first house you fall in love with is the house that you make an offer on and you're the only offer and it's accepted. Wonderful. But I've worked with hundreds of buyers over the last year and I promise you it's not going to go like that, something like that, And so then, hopefully if their third offer is accepted, it's that much better, but just having that real hard truth up front, I think is really, really important. And just letting them know that you're going to be here. We're going to have some turbulence along the way. Doesn't mean the plane's going to crash. I'm going to, steer. I've flown planes through this before. I've guided buyers in markets just like this before. They're in their perfect home. They're very happy and you will be too. Just stick with me. We'll get it done. Having that kind of expectation setting conversation up front is really, really important.
I think in a market like this, vendors and clients are really looking to us to be the calm in the storm, which isn't always easy. But keeping your emotions between the lines, one of those great bold laws, is really a great pathway to success and to earn some great referral business. Even if you put the phone down or, you shut the screen and close your laptop up and then you out, that's okay. Just, keep your emotions between the lines because they're really following the lead. If you call your clients and you're all like, flustered and jazzed up and, you're not very calm, they're going to absorb that and maybe be less comfortable than if you just create that calm road forward for them. And I always let them know too, I can't make decisions for you, but I can certainly help to pave the way. I can show you all the outcomes. We can predict together what possible outcomes look like. And that way you'll be more comfortable making an educated decision, or you'll feel more comfortable with the decision that you make. that avoids miscommunication as well.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, that airline analogy is perfect, actually, because I think everybody's experienced turbulence, and then when they land the plane, everybody claps at the end.
Yeah.
Hooray. So I think that's a great analogy we all should use.
And that can get some, you know, and that gets people closer together, right? Like the person that you were sitting next to, you know, when you got on the plane and didn't make eye contact with, and 2 or 3 hours in, you still haven't made eye contact with or whatever. And then you start to experience a little bit of turbulence and, you know, your whole hands or, you know, his head is on your shoulder or whatever. And it's like, you know, like sometimes that kind of conflict or whatever, that kind of hurdle, any kind of hurdle can bring people closer together too. And I think that's really important. You know, anybody can look good in an easy deal. Anybody, the worst loan officer out there, the worst realtor can look good in an easy transaction. It's really when the, you know what, hits the fan that a professional, a person or professionals and professionals, true character, I guess, or true level of professionalism shines and, or shows. And, you know, you really see what people are made of when the, you know what, hits the fan, you know, it's an opportunity. That's one of the things that I talk about with, he's not on the call here, but you guys know that I love Jeff Formica. And, you know, when I refer Jeff Formica out and maybe he takes, you know, 2 or 3 days to return a call on a, you know, to review a purchase and sale agreement draft. And I'm just, you know, for me, the reason I love Jeff Formica is because, yeah, he might take forever with a purchase and sale agreement draft, but there's nobody better at keeping a transaction together when the you know what hits the fan, when there's some animosity built up between buyers and sellers and both are ready to tell the other to go, you know where. There's nobody better at keeping a deal together than Jeff Formica. He's truly a master artist when it comes to that sort of thing. But there's probably nobody worse at reviewing a purchase and sale draft either, you know. So you got to kind of, you know, pick your poison there, I guess, you know. But yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has found, if this has happened to anybody else, but my psychology degree has definitely come in handy these past couple of months, especially with my buyers. I mean, you know, you tell them everything that they need to know. You do all your real estate business, but there's that every time I speak to one of them, it's, you know, let's talk them off the cliff, or, you know, they got things going in their head, or maybe they take something out on you because you had a bad day. But it's, you know, it keeps them engaged, but it's, you know, I just feel like that's what I've been doing for quite a while now, is really, you know, talking these poor buyers off the cliff of, I give up, I can't believe this, and, you know, so frustrating. So it's, you have to dig in deep, but as long as you keep communicating, because you feel them, sometimes they'll drift off. You won't hear from them for a while, even though you're sending them things and texting or whatever. A call every once in a while really works. That's my experience. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I find that in working with a lot of buyers right now, they're getting discouraged, and, you know, I'm trying to make sure I don't lose that business, but also keep them engaged, but try to be realistic. You know, if you're approved for 500 and the house is listed at 499 in Braintree, that, you know, just trying to be realistic, but also not negative. Like I'm interested to see how, like, everybody's finding the balance and keeping that going.
It's like a fine line we're walking.
Well, I think, yeah. And that's, you know, it's really, and I think that's really where it's hard too, to not get caught up in the emotional aspect of it. You know, I think somebody mentioned that earlier today. And I just really think it's really important to remember that, you know, we're the ones that are, you know, controlling the roller coaster ride that our clients are on. Yep. We're not riding the roller coaster ride with all 10 of our clients at the same time. You know, we're the one that's controlling it, the person at the lever. And along that same line, Mark, I think it's really important. Sam and I were having a conversation about this morning, where we have a lot of buyers agents out there that are, you know, really haven't been paid. They have a lot of buyers, but they haven't been paid in months because those buyers' offers aren't getting accepted, right? And at this point, you're thinking, is it even worth it you know, should I just go take that job at, you know, wherever, right? And finally get paid for working, you know? And just hang in there, because we all know what that cartoon, you know, that little cartoon, right? That, you know, where you see two different people that are two different guys that are digging in that mine with their little pickaxe, right? And the one is finally, you know, is turning around. He's really deflated. His pickaxe is over his shoulder and he's down. He's going the other way. And he was this close to reaching the gold. You know, been picking away for so long. And just a couple more hits and they were on the other side at that gold. But he decided to give up at the wrong moment. All it's going to take for your 12 buyers or 5 buyers or 20 buyers that you haven't been able to sell a thing to over the last 6 months, and it feels like forever, all it takes is a quick 10 or 20% increase in inventory. And now all of a sudden we're in a different market altogether. Okay. So do what you can to hang on, because we could be that close to you having all of your buyers under agreement. And it feels like it's a lifetime away and it'll never come. But markets shift so fast. And this one's going to shift fast because we've been talking about a shift for so long. And it's been so hot for so long that when it shifts, I really don't think it's going to be gradual. It's going to be like we're on Mastermind and all of a sudden we're talking about, remember how things were 2 weeks ago at our last week at our last Mastermind, when there were all these, you know, crazy amounts of offers and listings and all that stuff. Like, it's going to happen quick. So just hang on to them. Hang on for as long as you can.
I'm gonna hold you to that, Bob.
One of the things that I was thinking about was, and this is more of a delegating rule, but when it comes to communication, just ask yourself when you are talking with a client or coworker or anybody in life, if you're addressing the who, what, where, when, and why, right? And maybe even throw how in there too, okay? But a lot of times, especially us as really busy independent contractors with lives too, and wearing a million different hats, when we're communicating, we can oftentimes just shoot out what we want our message to be. But are we addressing the who, what, where, when, why, and how, right? And if you did, you know, you probably did a really good job of effectively communicating the message that you wanted to relay. And that's, I think, definitely important with leveraging. If you have an assistant, hey, take care of this. What does that even mean, right? But hey, will you, you know, upload this, these email addresses for my open house into my CRM by tomorrow afternoon? And I've already shown you how to do it, right? Like, I think that that's a lot different than saying, hey, take care of this, will you? You know, that sort of thing. Maybe at some point you get on the same level and they understand what that means. But anytime we're trying to communicate, just make sure that you are addressing those things: the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Very, very important.
Bob, can we go back to your point about the appraisal contingency? Because we talked about that last week. For anyone on the call today who attended Bob and Sam's Work at Wednesday last week, we talked about waiving the appraisal value as opposed to the appraisal contingency altogether, and how important that is. That will be a really good way for you to beef up your communication with your client if you can illustrate to them that you know what that means. So Bob and Sam, could you speak to that?
You want to jump on?
I mean, I've been talking so much this whole time, so. But really what we were speaking to is that, so first it was the difference between waiving your appraisal contingency and waiving the appraised value, and that an appraisal is more than just the value at the end of the day. So you could also run into the issue where if you chose to waive your appraisal and contingency entirely, your appraisal could come back subject to, and then what? So if the sellers won't let the buyers in the property to fix X, Y, and Z, what are you going to do? So there's a difference between waiving it entirely and waiving the appraised value. When it comes to the value, so we talked about, you know, whether waiving the value entirely or whether waiving the value to X dollar amount. So meaning that should, you know, you've spoken to your lender or Bob or I before placing an offer and saying that, listen, we're putting an offer in at $750. I've pulled all of the comps and I really cannot imagine this appraisal coming in any higher than $715. So I want to be able to come up with a plan for the buyers so that they aren't thinking that they're stuck in bringing so much more money to the closing, and which would happen if you waived your appraisal value. So really, we come up with a plan so that as long as they're not at a max financing type of situation, where we can really reconfigure the numbers to get to that point and show them what it would look like if that appraisal came in at 715. So whether it's changing their loan amount, having them pay their MI up front, there's really a lot of, things that we can do creatively before you take that jump. And it's nice to know that you have a contingency plan in place should it, in fact, you did your job properly and it comes in at 715 and you're like, I told you, but we already have a plan in place. And then both you and we look like the hero in that case, and your buyer will be eternally grateful.
Right.
Cool.
Right on. Great job.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you later.
Along those same lines, do you guys, the last couple of masterminds, I mentioned it in the last couple of Work at Wednesdays that Sam and I have done, I've talked about it. I've talked about where there are some tactics that any lender out there can use to basically set buyers' expectations properly ahead of time, so that if the appraisal comes in low, like Sam was just talking about, we could structure the loan so that it maybe doesn't even change their bottom line much at all. Where you could buy a house for $650, appraisal comes in at $550, and we can keep your cash to close and monthly payment the same. I really think that this is something you're going to see. I'm going to send this video out to all of my realtors this week, but do you want me to share my screen with you guys? Would you guys be interested in seeing how that works so I can show it to you?
Yes, please.
I do think it's,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I know this is something that I promise, if you guys, there's a lot of people that don't have their cameras on, but keep your cameras off if you want to, that's fine, but just bring your phone or whatever up close so you can see the numbers that I'm about to share with you here. And this will just take one quick minute, but this will get you deals, I promise. It's very, very easy. And any lender, can do this. So you guys should all see my loan origination screen here.
Yep.
And it's kind of a busy screen, but we're only going to really focus on two sections here. This section here under loan details, right in the middle of the screen, that shows appraised value, purchase price, loan amount, and the PMI type. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, this loan summary section that shows the interest rate, the term, the loan amount, the purchase price, the value. This scenario is 80% LTV, so they're putting 20% down. Here's their PITI over here, $29.88, and their cash to close is $140,700. So if we look at this scenario here, we have somebody buying a house for $650, and they're putting down 20%, so their loan amount's $520. So they're really happy about it. They got their offer accepted. As we mentioned, their cash to close is down here, almost 141. Bear with me for a minute. Just taking some notes here. And their monthly payment is $29.88. So if before you made this offer, we just wanted to talk with a client, and maybe even with the client and you, the realtor, on the call at the same time, I can show them that, especially if they have good credit and a good amount of money to put down, let's say that 2 weeks later, the appraisal comes in and it comes in at $550.
Yikes.
Hold up. Here we go. Blue circle of death. It's like the AOL dial-up. If everybody make sure that you check out, my most recent post in my MySpace account, because it's goes really well with my AOL dial-up. So 550 here, and this will change the loan to value quite a bit once the computer catches up.
Hold on, you
Bob
move
loves when this happens.
fast.
It's
You
actually
gotta
super
make-
good for our ADD too, because when this happens, you wait it out, but you get distracted and do something else, and then you forget what you were doing in the first place once it comes off.
My phone is doing the same thing right now.
Yeah.
Should just
So we
let
can,
that
we can all do this together.
Yeah.
We're all in this together.
We must have broken the internet.
maybe so.
Yeah.
An important and effective piece of communication. The internet couldn't take it.
Honestly,
No,
right.
the internet was like, it's too early for math.
Yeah. Coffee. This just takes a second. This just happens. I just opened up this this program.
And you know what I want to say while we watch that blue circle, is that the real lesson here is to get that the buyer's going to be pre-approved at the very, very beginning. And that there's just no way that you can show somebody something on a Friday and expect to get this all, and offers are due by Sunday, and expect to get all of this taken care of.
And not have
in advance, well in advance.
And not have there be any issues with communication too.
Yeah.
You know, I got a call on Sunday night at 7:30 from a realtor that I don't do much business with, but she does a lot of business. And, you know, she was asking if I could pre-approve a client that wants to make an offer on one of her listings. And I said, no. It was 7:30 at night. I mean, if Kristen called or somebody that I regularly, you know, but Kristen or Missy wouldn't do something like that. You know, they would have that buyer all set up, you know, but imagine if that offer is accepted. I mean, chances are pretty good that you're dealing with somebody who's making an emotional decision and they're going to have buyer's remorse first thing in the morning. I mean, do you really want to work like that? You know, just crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. I think this will work now. So I changed that the estimated value to 550. And as we talked about, their cash to close was right around 141 before. Their monthly payment was right around 29.88 all in. So now people are thinking that, hey man, my appraisal came in low. So now I have to make up that $100,000 difference and still come to the closing with my original down payment. And that's not the case. So in this case, what you'll see is that this buyer was putting down 20%. They were okay coming to the closing with that 141. But now that I changed the appraised value, their loan to value switches to a 95. So now what I'm doing is I am looking at this just as if it were a 5% down mortgage option. So what I'll do here is just add in them paying PMI upfront, not monthly PMI, but paying PMI upfront. 0.9%, a little less than a point. Let's see if I have any room to increase the loan amount a little bit. Yep, to offset some of their cash to close for the cost of that almost point that we added for the cost of the upfront PMI. So now they're all set. So now I've restructured this as if it were a 5% down mortgage option, which in my eyes of the lender it is because the appraisal came in so low, but the buyer still has to pay the seller the extra 100 grand between the appraisal and the purchase price. So if you look at this, I change it to a 95. Their cash to close goes from 141 to essentially 143. And their monthly payment stays the same at 29.88 because nothing else changed because they're paying PMI up front. So this is one of those things, guys, where let's say a house is on the market for 600 and the buyers were okay going up to 650. If you, me, and the buyer had a Zoom call like this, I could say, as long as the appraisal comes in at 550, these terms are good. You're good to go here. And if the buyer is okay with that, then you can go ahead and make that offer. And if you as the realtor think that there's no way that a house that's on the market for 600 could appraise for less than 550, at that point now you know with confidence that you can waive the lender's appraised value with your offer, or lender's appraisal not to come in, lender's appraised value to come in no lower than 550. You know, you can do something like that as opposed to coming into this blind. Now, good credit and a decent down payment helps, but even with 10% down, you could still get away with the appraisal coming in 5% light and structure it this way and really not have it impact the borrower's bottom line really at all. If this
Bob, does that affect the commission? I mean, does that affect the the interest percentage rate?
It can a little bit. So, but it doesn't as much as you think, especially with a conventional loan or even a government loan too, actually, now that I'm thinking of it. But there's a tiny, there's like a 0.25% hit to price. Actually, the rate's lower at a 90 LTV or 10% down than it is at 20% down. And the reason for that is my adds a little bit of less risk to the lender. So slightly better rate, but that's only a 0.25 point hit to price. So even that could be built in. They pay a 1/4 point to keep their rate the same and pay this PMI up front. And they're paying, 1 1/4 points essentially. That's way better than coming to the closing with $50,000 difference.
Yeah, because I think that's some of the hang up that some of the buyers that I deal with are like, oh, I want to be under 3%, da 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 da. It's like, okay, well, if you got great credit, I leave that up to you. That's your core competency. I yield that to you all the time. But I think this is a great tool, like you're saying, if there can be a Zoom conversation with somebody and you explain this to them and show them that graph or show them that screen and say, look at this, if we do this, we can do this. And your payment will stay the same because that's what we agreed upon. And don't worry about the percentage rate.
Yeah, or the percentage rate doesn't even change.
That's even better. Yeah.
It really, yeah, that's it. And a lot of times that 1/4 point to price can be absorbed by me too. So I can sometimes, just to make it cleaner for the borrower, get the exception to lock them in at the same rate without charging that extra 1/4 point, But that's something that's really important, guys. And if we just went over pretty quickly, if you wanted to set up something on the side, just a Zoom call with Sam or me to go over this, just like we just did until it clicks, I'm happy to do it, because that is something that will get you deals. I promise. How many times have you been ready to submit an offer with a nervous client, and then you bring up the appraisal waiver or whatever, and then they decide to not even make the offer because they're just putting too much out there. You didn't even give the seller a chance to say no at that point. Maybe a conversation like this with a lender or me or Sam ahead of time would have given them that confidence to just go ahead and say, yeah, let's do it, Yeah.
Hey, Bob, approaching this from the other side, from the listing side, seeing, how you just kind of work through that tool in adjusted numbers. And with what we've been discussing recently about appraisals and concerns about appraisals, is this something that maybe we could take into consideration? Like, for example, if we get to that point where our listing doesn't come in at value with the buyer's bank appraisal, is it possible that we can have further conversation with the lender and saying, hey, what can you do to adjust things for the low appraisal, as opposed to renegotiating on the number?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that that's probably, even a good conversation, Bill, for the attorney in the transaction. And the reason I say that is because we've talked about this in Masterminds before, where the mortgage contingency clause is written. It's very vague, right? If, buyer cannot obtain an approval for conventional mortgage financing in the amount of $450 by such and such a date, the borrower can withdraw from the transaction and get their money back, right? Something like that. So when the buyer says, hey, the appraisal came in low, and I can't get approved for financing because I have to come to the closing with an extra 50 grand that I don't have, this is something that you might be able to put in your back pocket. And as we've seen here, the buyer could still theoretically get approved, without it impacting their bottom line at all. So I think that that is something that's intentional. The P&S is intentionally drawn up that way, so that if it's not clear, it just goes to arbitration, it goes to court or whatever. But I do think that that's something that should be looked at, definitely.
Okay, because I'm nervous about a couple of transactions I'm in. Just there's that unknown variable about what's that appraiser's opinion of value going to come in at.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, you got it.
We're all there right now, Bill, which is why communication is good for everybody right now. Quite honestly, we all need to be talking to each other about what's going on and just work so hard to provide the best service we can. And, Bob, to your credit and to Sam's credit, do other lenders even know that this stuff is important? Are they having these conversations with the realtors who they work with or the buyers who they're taking care of? Do buyers even know that they have options? Exactly, Sam. They absolutely do not know. They don't know.
I'm just kidding. They know.
Yeah.
Everything that Bob and Samantha give to us every Tuesday morning and on their Work at Wednesday calls, that's the stuff we have to bring to our clients. Otherwise, it's fun to sit here and it's wonderful to see your friends, but I hope you're building your basis of knowledge and your professionalism so that you can share this with your clients and provide great service so that more business comes your way year after year after year.
And that's, you know what, Miss, that's really what it's all about. It's about, you know, there's a reason that all those stupid shows on HGTV get it's such great ratings.
They're awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such trash, right? But it gives such little bit of information that people become hooked by it. And I just think that, you know, whether it's me and mortgage, I mean, have any of you guys ever read Mortgage Guidelines? It's kind of like reading, I don't know, God, it's terrible, right? But when I'm reading, yeah, like the thesaurus or something, you know, when I'm reading Mortgage Guidelines, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm looking, like scanning for things that little piece of information that I can keep and spin into something sexy, right? And that's what I give my clients. That's what they hold on to, and that's what keeps a lot of times them coming back for more. And I just really think, like, if you took what you know, the information that I just gave and you put it out there, you know, if the appraisal comes in low, don't worry. You know, you may not have to worry about it because you may not have to come to the closing with the difference. Call me and I'll tell you why, you know, something like that. Right. Those types of important pieces of information is what really does keep us from, it separates the realtors that are commodities from realtors or even lenders that are real professionals and value adds, you know? Well, it's 10:01, kept you a minute past the time, but does anybody have any thing they'd love to get off their chest? Any burning desires before this thing wraps up?
It's going to be a great day.
It's going to be a great day. All right, guys.
Great day.
As always, thank you all very much for coming by, and we will see you next Tuesday on Masterminds.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you
Very much. Take
Thanks,
care.
Sam. Thanks, Bob. Bye.